Hello to all. Starting today here in the port to discuss a bit of the changes with the just recently released patch 0.9.1. This patch introduced some new modules to the game, and it's been a while since modules have been introduced, or new ones have been introduced anyway, so might as well take a look at them. In terms of carriers, there are several new ones. Today we'll be looking at just one of them because I'm going to be focusing my efforts on slot 3 over here. So typically in slot 3, for the vast majority of my carriers, I do end up taking Torpedo Bombers Modification 1, which gives 5 seconds of attack time to Torpedo Bombers. This allows you to attack from longer ranges in order to get a nice focused attack to get an accurate first drop of your Torpedo Bombers for your first strike. It also allows you to drop or start your drop well outside of the range of anti-aircraft artillery, which does slow the rate at which your reticle will narrow. Now, one of the new modules introduced is this one over here, Aerial Torpedo Bombers Modification 1. And what it does is that it increases aerial torpedo speed by 5% of base speed. And as such, it's beneficial to, well, any nation with torpedoes, but particularly those with fast torpedoes. As such, the nation with the fastest torpedoes is, of course, the Japanese at this moment, so we're going to be doing our testing today on 2 test platforms. The first is the Kaga. This has been the test platform I've used for basically all carrier changes throughout the game thus far anyway. My stats kind of reflect that. As a result, did a lot of my learning on this carrier due to its very forgiving nature with your high reserves. So do note that right now, before I mount this module, my torpedoes are doing 55 knots, which means they have a base speed of 50 knots. So I'm going to mount this module. Right now demounting is free anyway, so might as well. So I'm going to lose out on that torpedo attack time, but in exchange I'm going to get that 5% attack torpedo speed, and you can see they go from 55 up to 58 knots, so I've gained 3 knots of speed. This is because, of course, the base speed is 50, so you get 2.5, and I guess in this case World of Warships rounds it to 58. I'm not sure if it's a true 58 or if it's actually 57.5. The other test platform we're going to be using is the Ryujo. The Ryujo also has 55 knots of speed, so we're going to mount this modification. Anyhow, we'll start with the Kaga, and then move on to the Ryujo. Actually, no, I've changed my mind. I'm going to start with the Ryujo at tier 6, which is basically the introductory to the rest of the Japanese carrier line after the brokenness of Hosho, and then move forward from there. So the Ryujo, tier 6 carrier, she has the A6M20, so that's the early war 0 with the white paint job and the drop tanks, although technically, realistically speaking, well, the Zeros enter combat, they should have ditched their drop tanks, but that's too advanced for the modeling of World of Warships, I suppose. As well as the B5N Kate. This is the classic torpedo bomber of the Japanese. These were succeeded, of course, in Japanese naval service by the B6N Tenzin that you see on the Kaga, which was further then preceded by the B7A Ryusei that you see on the Shokaku. But in the case of the Ryujo, she's using the B5Ns, and for her dive bombers she's using an early model of the D4Y, the Susei. The D3A is sadly not currently present in the game except maybe on the Hosho, or I'm not quite sure, I haven't actually played Hosho since the rework. Anyhow, match-wise, we're in a 6 to 8 game, so we're bottom tier in a double carrier game on the map Northern Lights. The mode is Domination. We're against an enemy Lexington and Ryujo. In addition to that, we have a Bismarck, King George, Sinoth, Baltimore, Mogami, York, Devonshire, Perf, Liska, and Fubuki. We are going to be testing the torpedo bombers, so I am going to bias the torpedo bombers a little bit. You can see here some interface changes as well with the coming of the update. Splits the attack groups into their separate groups, so you can really see how many what's it called? Strike packages you have in a given squadron. So that's a nice quality of life change. I appreciate that. But we are going to focus on our torpedo bombers. Nevertheless, we are going to still do our job and scout as normal. You see the Zero's accelerating up to a nice 181 knots. The Zero is a fairly fragile tier 6 rocket attack plane, but they are fast, and they maneuver quite well. The A6M2 in fact does have slightly better maneuverability historically than the A6M5, the tier 7 Zeros on the Kaga that we'll be visiting later, although I don't know if that's reflected in the game. The A6M5 sacrificed a bit of her wingtip length in exchange for being more maneuverable. We find the Baltimore. Baltimore's obviously an undesirable. I'm a tier 6 carrier, don't want to go against a tier 8 American cruiser. Gonna continue cruising. I honestly shouldn't have scouted the Baltimore at all. I forgot to mention the destroyer spawns, or look at the destroyer spawns. So there's one inside the bubble right now, and there's another one mirroring my T-61 over there. There's a perf. Since I have 4 strike packages anyway, I'm gonna just expend one early on since I'm flying through this perf's AA anyway. Might as well make him pay for it with some HP. There's a Mogami. Mogami's AA is not impressive, but because I am a tier 6 plane, it does chip away at me. He's working on his second plane now. Still no eyes on the destroyers. They appear to have evacuated the premise, and at this point I'm going to recall Baltimore, King George. So in terms of good targets, there's this York out here. The Baltimore is alone. But because I don't have access to the heal yet on these tier 6 torpedo bombers, I'm reluctant to attack a heavy AA target unless necessary. As I mentioned, this is the infamous B5N Kate. This is the torpedo bomber that was in service at the time of the Pearl Harbor attacks and remained in service for too long, I want to say, probably until they were seeing widespread use well into 1944, when they were already quite obsolete. Pretty slow torpedo bomber, although this is actually kind of fast for the tier at 172. Again, fragile HP pools, and a 2x4 setup. The torpedo launch is, of course, a Japanese aerial torpedo doing 58 knots instead of 55 now. There's a Fubuki there. With 6500 alpha. Now, one of the best traits of Japanese torpedoes, because they are so fast, is that they're actually an excellent anti-destroyer weapon. And with an extra 3 knots, we are going to see some improved use. I'm looking for the Fubuki, obviously, but on my approach angle, not great. So he's going to either beach or turn out. Spotting him briefly for my Akatsuki. Undetected. He's firing from the smoke, however, which gives me an idea. I'm going to consider these two my pre-drops and then move in onto the King George. Oh, okay.
Taking fire.
Misaimed this, unfortunately. I'm gonna have to correct my course. He is in the overlapping AA aura of the Sinop.
All stations requesting fire.
You can see here the lack of TBM1 means that I have to drop a little early because I screwed up my approach angle. But you can see the increased speed, even though my drop was technically inaccurate, allowing me to land one of 2 torpedoes. Missed the Fubuki with my torpedoes, by the way. It doesn't look like this guy's moving at all, so at the last second I was going to try and drop. Unfortunately, I hit a flak puff, I think, that spawned on top of my torpedo bomber since I didn't even have an opportunity to dodge it.
Maintaining present course.
There are those drop tanks I mentioned. Really, when you're entering a combat zone, you jettison your drop tanks, no matter if they're full or not, so not exactly a accurate to history practice to have them still mounted as these rocket attack planes are flying into combat, but these aren't really fighters anymore. They're being used as strike craft because of the model of the CV rework. My ally Shokaku hunting for the Fubuki. He doesn't get any looks at him, which tells me that he's still in smoke. That smoke is fading though, and because the... Oh, that torpedo's well on track. Gonna squeak out my damage first. Just kidding. Oh, we're already here, and the Shokaku just is harassing this Mogami, so I'm gonna assist in this harassing. Now my rocket planes aren't nearly as potent. I only shoot 8 rockets as opposed to the, I believe it's 18 of the Shokaku's N1K2J
Concentrate fire on the enemy warship.
Violet Lightnings, Shindenkais.
We're under attack.
But they're still pretty good when you can get most of your rockets to land. Still not pushing that corner. Note my hull is very stealthy on the Ryujo.
Autopilot mode enabled.
I don't know if you can see that, so I'll just pull up the raw detectability. Okay, apparently it gives me plane detectability. But you can see 8.8, I believe, or is it 8.6? Kind of hard to tell. But anyway, sub 9 kilometer detection is very impressive. You never get that stealthy again. And this is on a ship that doesn't have access to concealment modules, so the Ryujo's pretty ridiculously stealthy, which means you can play pretty close to the front line. It's one of the Ryujo's key strengths. You lose out a bit on that power later. I was considering the Sinop, but the Baltimore is still with him. So we're going to turn away and head for the Mogami. So thus far we have made 1 torpedo strike, which was kind of showing off the benefits of just running TPM-1 as I have been in past, as opposed to this new torpedo speed upgrade. It did, you know,
Fighter airborne.
end up helping a little bit.
Our team has taken the lead.
Okay, Mogami gets dispatched, so Bismarck's our next target, tier 8. However, his AA is not the greatest.
Engaging enemy.
Haven't reached for the APDBs yet, which is unfortunate, but we'll make use of them later. This is really a test session rather than a review session, so no need to necessarily use a balanced weapon loadout. Okay, my torpedoes are so fast that they miss. He was in fact not moving. I'm pre-dropping here because I want to make another run onto the Bismarck. Looking for better targets, don't see one. Swoop out and away. You can see the B5N does have the advantage of having a relatively good turning circle. Not as tight as some of the American torpedo bombers, but sufficient to cruise quite nicely. Bismarck has 5.2 kilometer long range AA range on his 105mm AA mounts.
We're under
We've
attack.
lined up, so now we go in for our final approach.
Destination reached.
As long as we don't hit any
Autopilot
flak.
mode disabled.
Alright, well don't do like I did. It's moving fairly slowly, so it looks like that torpedo's gonna miss as a result. Haven't done too much thus far, and that torpedo is basically so fast that it's gonna miss because he stopped moving. Pretty stompy game. Gonna move a bit closer, I
Autopilot
think.
mode enabled.
And by a bit closer, I mean I'm gonna move into the cap. King George with his Sinop. That plane's accelerate to 181, so that's probably a 9 kilometer slingshot. I was considering the King George, but I should just finish off the Sinop in this scenario. So my slingshot's going to be a bit out of range compared to what I want. Now with 2 AP bombs that deal 6,000 damage, I'm going to need to land both of them here. You can see the AA shredding my squadron.
We're under attack.
Ooh, okay, so I got the 2 citadels, but he did heal in time. 1500 health, we'll see. Hopefully my Shokaku finishes him, but it looks like his first drop was inaccurate. 1000 health. Hopefully I have enough HP on this. Okay, well, definitely if I'm gonna hit flag, I'm not going to. Thus far, not impressed with the new module. Still preferring my preferred spec, but, you know, you have to give it a couple of runs
Nice work.
to get a good idea and feel for what something actually does after a change. You don't want your pre-existing biases to basically what you're used to
Fighter
cloud your
airborne.
judgment. The best case, of course, is using the torpedoes to hit a cruiser or destroyer, a fast-moving target. Using torpedoes against battleships should still be about as easy. I'm gonna reduce my lead because of the extra 3 knots. Been having trouble leading.
Nice
You
work.
can see a very comfortable clip on my now 58 knot torpedoes, which is actually a respectable speed, equivalent to some of the more average speed shipborne torpedoes at this point.
Taking fire.
Especially on a longer angle of attack, with a chasing angle like that, the extra speed is definitely helpful.
Enemy battleship
1000
sunk.
health on this torpedo bomber. And the game does end. Very inauspicious Ryuho game. I think at this point I'm going to separate this video into two separate commentaries or discussions. One with the Ryuho and one with the Kaga. And then after, if I have time, I might test it on the Audacious as well. The Audacious is another carrier which, because of the short arming time of British torpedoes, I tend not to take TBM1. Right now I'm taking rocket attack time, but rocket attack time is honestly worthless, to be quite frank. It doesn't really do that much. There are very, very rare scenarios where you want the extra rocket plane attack time, so I'm going to switch it over to this torpedo speed module and see if that helps. Now do note that the British torpedoes have a base speed of 35 knots as opposed to the Japanese torpedoes 50, so you're going to get a much smaller benefit at about 1 knot of speed. It's like 1.75, so it should round it 2 knots. So you get an extra 2 knots to bring your 40 knot with torpedo acceleration torpedoes up to a speed of 42 knots. So you'll go from kind of matching ship speed torpedoes to USS Black torpedoes, more or less. So we had a pretty slow first game. We were bottom tier, of course, in the Ryuho, so we had to avoid some of the AA threats, so we couldn't keep constantly attacking as we wished. Once more, in this match, we are bottom tier again. Again, we're paired with a higher tier carrier in 6 to 8 matchmaking, so I guess this will be 2 examples of hard matchmaking. Shokaku and Ark Royal on the enemy team. And then we have Bismarck, New Mexico, West Virginia, Fuso, so battleships not too scary. Chapayev, Atlanta, York, Leander, Bagioni, Sims. The Atlanta I want to avoid, even though Atlanta A is kind of gimped since the rework because of the way her DP mounts are treated, her main battery. She still has that defensive fire, so she's still pretty thorny. And the Chapayev, even though his AA is relatively unimpressive for a tier 8, is thorny enough for a tier 6 carrier. But overall should be a pretty easy match. The Sims might be taking defensive fire, might be taking speed boost, we'll see. If he's taking defensive fire, he could also be a problem. But I do want to try and hunt the Sims with my torpedo bombers if possible, because as I mentioned, fast torpedoes, the most ideal use case is to use the high speed and therefore reduced lead times to hunt enemy destroyers. I'm gonna scout my side. Remember, I'm fairly stealthy, so I can afford to sit still for a little bit. There's the Atlanta I mentioned. Is engaging me at 5.8. And the Sims is being protected over there. Looks like he's gliding horizontally above the cab, so unless he dives into the fighter, I won't be stopped by it. Looks like he had his AA on. We'll see if he continued across or if he dove in. Alright, there we go. He did in fact dive in. I trimmed that fighter squadron. You can see a defensive fire running probably from the Atlanta since he has infinite charges. So my drop is going to get skewed. But that is the defensive fire charge expended. And now I can go after him with the torpedo bombers. We're in pretty close proximity, so I'm going to move a bit closer toward the center. This is going to move me further from my quarry, but it's going to keep me relatively safe. Attack planes from the Ark Royal coming in. Sims touches the cap, so he should be kind of nose in in this quadrant, based on the most likely entry angle. Now the defensive fire should have expired by now. Note that I'm not using too much boost. I want to be able to maneuver as tightly as possible, which requires using air brake. And that is facilitated by
We're under attack.
The boost bar. I'm probing.
What's obliged, Commander?
I'm gonna try and hold on to these planes if I don't find him.
That was a
He
great
is not where I wanted or not where I expected him to be. He's in fact over there, but firing.
Approaching target.
And you can see, thanks to the fact that he's in his smoke screen,
Taking fire.
I was briefly undetected thanks to my 6.75 stealth. No dice on the blind torpedo drop. So if he's in that angle, he's probably bow towards this direction, yep. I have 4 planes left, so that should be enough HP to make a pass. So here is the true test of whether the module is useful when I'm not using 15 seconds of attack time. Doesn't appear that he's running torpedo acceleration, or sorry, defensive fire, using those fast torpedoes. Can I clip him? And we do get a clip, not bad. No, we need other targets. There's a Bismarck over there. So I guess I'll go after the Bismarck with the
Autopilot
APDBs.
mode disabled.
Decent performance there though. I was able to get a chasing torpedo.
Approaching target.
So we need about 4 planes to make the strike, so 6 planes for a slingshot package. So pre-drop once. Use a little bit of the boost, but not all of it. The Suseis are fairly fast, reaching 181 knots.
Requesting support.
Could also go after that Atlanta, he's probably sitting still. The Bismarck is turning away, which makes him less of an attractive target. Okay, so my spawning range is 9 kilometers. Oh, okay, so I see where the Atlanta is now in my slingshot. So I don't want to boost too much. Enemy carrier that's mirroring me does drop the fighter.
Approaching target.
But these planes are doomed to die anyway. We do score 1 citadel. Nice. Not the easiest feat against an Atlanta. This plane's doomed to die. Probably should have just F'd out and accepted he was gonna die. AFK Leander's still there. Gonna go after this York, I think, and move my carrier hull across to the side that we're currently winning. These guys are running from me anyway, so because they're moving away from my carrier, it's gonna reduce my DPM. Gonna attack the York because my allied Lexington, or Enterprise, right? Enterprise is already working on him, so he might have scored a fire. York does about 33, 34 knots, which is a fair amount of speed, and he's a pretty stubby cruiser, so the extra speed should help. There's the West Virginia in the distance, but we're not here to test West Virginia torpedoes. There's that York. He does not appear to have been paying attention because he decided that beaching himself was a smart idea.
We're under attack.
Turn out and away from the West Virginias. AA bubble. Lost 2 aircraft so far, hit some flak on the way in, you'll note.
Approaching target.
So he's unstuck himself. He's turning
We're
in.
under attack. Returning. Taking fire.
And there's still that AFK Leander to contend with. Note he launched his fighter, but my Enterprise is attacking him, so I will watch my allied planes. Missed on that second torpedo strike. So not too successful there. The beaching of the York against that Leander did kind of throw off my aim. Making an attack on the Leander, who appears to have been moved a little bit, but that could just be by the jostling. Oh no, he's here, I think. He appears to be moving at quarter speed.
We're under attack.
Alright, my bombs straddle into the water.
Support the allied target. Approaching target.
Might just be 1 bomb on the York. It'll be 2 if I drop a little earlier, so gonna try and lead ahead of him. Unfortunately, straddles. He is vulnerable again though, so we'll try him again with the Torpedo Bombers. My Torpedo Bombers are running a bit thin, so I'm gonna have to switch over to using the rocket planes after this. Enemy is very bunched at the back though, so not easy to deal with.
under attack.
Move out of the range of the York's 5.2s, or 105mm 5.2km rifles. In terms of AA armament,
Engaging
this
enemy.
time we're going to be engaging from a chase angle.
We're under attack.
Follow into the curve.
Concentrate fire on the designated target. Approaching target.
Give him a fair amount of lead.
Taking fire.
He's dodging quite actively.
Approaching target.
Well, as I mentioned, even if you fail all your strikes against the York, it's fine. Well, it's not fine, but obviously what can you do, right? If you miss, you miss. Against an actively maneuvering player, it can be challenging to land. Still have 10 out of 12 armor-piercing dive bombers, so if we can find something appropriate, we'll go after that. But in the meantime, we will continue to harass this York.
Engaging enemy.
I'm gonna pop my engine cooling just to reduce the amount of time my planes spend inside of anti-aircraft fire. Thus far, not noticing too many superior use cases for the speed, but
Approaching target.
TBM-1 is somewhat situational as well. We broke his engine here, and with his strike note, one less plane.
Taking fire.
I'm gonna go after this Fuso that's pushing in my armor-piercing dive bombers and looking for a target, as I mentioned. And he will suffice nicely. He is close to the Leander and West Virginia, however, so do need to take some care. I would like to push my carrier hull forward, but it's not currently super safe to do so.
We're under attack.
You can see Fuso's AA is unimpressive at best. First approach angle is not going to be perfect.
Approaching target. I need support. Taking fire.
Good enough for one Citadel, however. You can see here the Ryujo starts you off kind of casually with the APDBs.
Engaging
Eventually with the Shokaku though, they do become quite deadly.
Taking fire.
Another one Citadel. And normally with 3 planes left I probably wouldn't attempt another attack unless I absolutely had to, but thanks to the Fuso's low overall personal AA, as long as I can stay outside of this York's intervening AA, I'll be able to get one last attack off even if it's with just one bomb. Alright, that was not worth it in that case, but you can't be results based in your thinking.
Enabled.
If I got another Citadel, it definitely would have been worth it. Would have saved me an extra torpedo strike. Now my torpedoes hit for 6,500, right? So he should die if I can land both, although he is currently popping a heal. Note that if I'd landed that Citadel, he would be 6,000 HP less, and that 6,000 HP would be unhealable, so... I'm gonna pop my engine cooling. Be just beyond the bow with my fast torpedoes. A useful trick to have in your arsenal, no doubt, but you could have done that with TBM-1 as well, I'm sure. In fact, with these new faster torpedoes, I'm having to stay very careful so as not to overlead. You can see, if they were a little slower, they might have actually clipped. Thinking about whether I want to re-engage with this torpedo bomber, I think not at this point.
Returning to ship.
Okay, this is no longer a viable position. Let's go beyond there. 10 and 12. See if we can get a good hit onto the Fuso.
Airborne.
We have a pretty full Susei squadron. Not a great angle of approach, however. Maybe we'll hit the York instead. Our team trading pretty poorly at this point.
Approaching target. Taking fire.
Okay, my team continuing to trade pretty poorly. That
Approaching
first
target.
while AFK Leander, like, beating the crap out of my allies.
We're under attack.
Give the York a fair bit of lead, and we are rewarded with the
Returning,
Citadel.
taking fire.
He doesn't heal, so let's go after him with the rocket planes. I know there's a Leander in my face, but he smoked up just now, so hopefully he'll give me enough time to turn around. Enterprise wasting his time, I'm already bringing rocket planes. They should recognize that and engage the Fuso instead, but, you know, players go for what they see. And players often don't see what they need to.
Enemy cruiser foundered.
I'm gonna circle around in the Fuso AA. Try and light some fires. Now the Fuso is fairly resistant to high explosive, but his nose is relatively unarmored.
Taking fire.
Okay, unfortunately I hit the wrong part
Fire.
of his ship, so I'm gonna have to follow up. Fighter squadron tags the fighter.
Maintaining present course.
Now killing that York did buy me a little bit of time, but my Enterprise is gonna need to put in a lot more work. Based on angle, it would have been much easier for me to engage the Fuso with my armor-piercing dive bombers. So I might just engage this Chapayev instead, because my allies are dispatching the Fuso. You really do have to be careful about target selection when you're in a carrier. You're very limited on time. Fast torpedoes, remember, so I don't want him to short my torpedoes by just charging into them. These are going to be chase torps, and he has tier 8 AA, as I mentioned. Not normally a problem.
The enemy is about to win.
But it can be. Okay, somehow they did not dispatch the Fuso.
Maintaining present course.
We're gonna need that kill in order to justify points. He's worth 60. Or 50? I think 50.
Approaching
I'm gonna
target.
slingshot just to expedite my way there.
Taking fire.
Oh shit. Okay, I over slingshot it and someone died.
Approaching
Means we're almost out of time. Holding down on the air brake. I'm gonna need a glancing hit here. Alright. Don't over slingshot because you'll lose games. I could have bought myself a couple of seconds here, but I think because of my mistake, we're at risk of losing immediately. Unless this guy dies.
Approaching target.
989. Okay, someone got a kill thing. Fuck
Taking
for that.
fire.
Alright.
Returning. Taking fire.
You see me trying to throw the game repeatedly by missing the Fuso and having to resort to rockets. This Arizona kill, for example, is going to be very concerning. 990. Alright. So, could have bought myself some time there if I landed those hits, but my team was trolling just as hard as me, I guess you could say. So obviously there, my performance of the APDBs, not exactly something you want to imitate, but anyhow. 2 bottom tier games over the course of the 2 games. Decent performance. I expect better out of an Enterprise player, but there's a lot of potatoes. It looks like he flew into the Atlanta a lot. So we're 1 for 1, both games bottom tier. The first game, I forgot to go over the performance. We did a little less in the first game, but the first game was shorter. We kind of won by capping them out in a very not close game. But anyhow, initial testing impressions, I don't know if it's necessarily an upgrade that you have to take. Right now, I would say it's kind of 50-50 between TBM1 and aerial torpedoes, even on this Japanese carrier where you get the most benefit out of it. Haven't really felt that much benefit, but perhaps we'll feel more benefit when we switch over to the Kaga. So that'll be all for now on this Ryujo initial impression. I'll test it again further on the Kaga, so I will catch you there in that video. Cheers.